Are you really serious about this?
Tonight on 2020, we're on the hunt for people accused of preying on the most desperate.
You people are liars. You're just an actor. You don't know what the hell you're talking about.
He's one to talk, promoting an alleged miracle cure. Meet the Archbishop of the so-called church, claiming hundreds of thousands of followers.
The church is under no law.
A breakthrough in a bottle, curing diseases from autism to cancer.
I could say that I've been totally cured.
But what's in those miracle drops?
It's an industrial bleach.
Our 2020 hidden camera investigation.
Are you harming people, do you think, with this, sir?
I hope they think I'm a raving lunatic. I really do.
Here's Brian Ross.
It was a cloudy Saturday morning in Southern California as our 2020 crew waited in this hotel for the arrival of the man who calls himself the Archbishop. 59-year-old Mark Grennan had no idea 2020 was on his tail. And over the next 2 days, we watched, with hidden cameras rolling, as the Archbishop went about his business, making claims that what's in this glass is a miracle cure for virtually any disease.
This is our sacrament.
Preying on the desperate and vulnerable, including women with breast cancer and the parents of autistic children.
I would like to see somebody go get these people.
On this day, the Archbishop's cathedral was a hotel conference room. His vestments, a black leather jacket, and a bejeweled Panama hat. And his sermon to people who were charged $450 a head seems to have come right out of the book of Shams.
I got people curing with major stuff just with that. From prostate cancer to brain cancer to autism.
All by drinking what he calls the sacraments of the Genesis 2 Church of Health and Healing, available for anyone who makes what is called a donation.
It's like watching a really good magician's show.
Dr. Stephen Novello of the Yale School of Medicine has spent much of his career exposing all kinds of medical quacks.
We're looking at the best, the people who have hit upon something that sells.
Mr. Grennan? Brian Ross, ABC News. Can we talk to you for a second, please?
And when it came time to ask the Archbishop about his miracle cure and preachings,
We're a church, and we have sacraments we use.
This can cure all these diseases.
it quickly turned ugly.
We're a piece of they say in Spanish.
Quite the language from an archbishop.
Liars!
And as you will see, it got even uglier.
Stupid son of a bitch. You sabe demasiado.
For years, Mark Grennan has targeted people he calls the uneducated and simple, traveling the world, from Africa to Latin America to the Caribbean, making a good living as a man of the cloth. And now in the U.S., with slick internet videos,
I could say that I've been totally cured.
and under the guise of a church, the Archbishop and his supposed miracle cure, called MMS for Miracle Mineral Solution, are attracting an online congregation of followers that they say numbers in the hundreds of thousands.
Vulnerable, desperate people are always going to be targets for con men. If somebody swoops in with the miracle solution to your health problems, there's a huge emotional motivation to believe them.
I've used it on my children.
Among the church's testimonials, this video from a licensed California doctor, John Humiston, who appears to endorse MMS. But when we set out to verify the claims of Dr. Humiston, he told us he no longer uses MMS and never believed it could cure any disease.
You regret having done that?
At this point, yes, I'd say I regret having done that, yeah.
To find out what's in this miracle cure, we first went undercover in Houston to get our hands on some of it. Two 2020 producers signed up to become church reverends at a weekend session, with dozens of people attending at a cost of $450 each.
Just too loud or not?
That's okay.
It's safe because it's an oxidizer.
Featuring a clip of that California doctor who actually says he doesn't believe it cures any diseases. At the end, a quick investiture and an official-looking ministerial accreditation signed by Archbishop Grennan.
It's a get-out-of-jail-free card, to sell snake oil.
As members of the church, our producers ordered a shipment of the MMS, $150 for these small bottles. We took our miracle cure to a respected testing laboratory, and the results were as expected. Nothing miraculous about it. Essentially, a kind of chlorine.
MMS is an industrial chemical. It's an industrial bleach.
Dr. Paul Wong is the Senior Vice President of Autism Speaks.
The fact that anybody would suggest that you should give this to somebody is ridiculous. This is scary, dangerous stuff.
In fact, look what happened when we poured some of it, undiluted, onto a pair of jeans. The denim turned white through both pant legs. And Dr. Wong says even at the prescribed much smaller dose, it's still a danger.
And that's what it's doing in the gut of the kids who are given this. There's nothing good that MMS is doing.
Yet MMS is being aggressively pushed by the church to parents of autistic children desperate for a cure, says Roland Eggers, the father of 12-year-old Mitchell.
You thrive on this illusion that you're going to somehow fix your kid.
That's good. Put that in there.
Or that one day you're going to unautismize your child.
But Eggers says he quickly knew to stay away from MMS for his son.
Let's walk down to the chicken coop.
After doing just a little online checking.
They've got their own Facebook group. There are people admitting to using this stuff on their children. The children are experiencing side effects like loss of bladder control. They're developing these strange facial rashes, which are more like chemical burns, actually. We're talking about autistic children. A great many of them wouldn't be capable of telling you if this was bothering them.
And for women with breast cancer, relying on MMS could be potentially fatal if used instead of established medical treatments.
The pharmaceuticals.
But that's what Archbishop Brennan was preaching just this month on his church YouTube channel. Rely on MMS, not mammograms or doctors.
If you get breast cancer, I'm not going to say deserve it, you brought it on.
I think that kind of advice is terrifying.
Dr. Jennifer Ashton, ABC's senior medical contributor, was appalled to hear what the Archbishop had to say.
To go so far as to blame any woman for having or getting breast cancer, to me, is absolutely unacceptable.
Did Sylvia love sailing?
But it was only after the death of the wife of Doug Nash, a retired NASA scientist, that the government began to investigate who was peddling the miracle MMS solution. On a sailing trip to the Pacific with his wife Sylvia, friends offered her a small container of MMS as protection from malaria.
About 15 minutes later, she began to indicate that she was feeling bad.
What were the symptoms?
Diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and that increased in intensity.
But as we saw, the Archbishop teaches that nausea and diarrhea are actually signs that the MMS is working. Nothing to worry about. Laughed off by Archbishop Brennan.
Yeah, we go a little too fast to get a little diarrhea, a little nausea. They got diarrhea, a little nausea.
There was nothing funny about it for Sylvia Nash.
I felt her go slump, and her eyes flipped up in her head and defocused. I think that's when she actually died, when her heart stopped.
Right there?
Right there.
In your arms?
In my arms, yeah.
An autopsy could not determine the precise cause of Sylvia Nash's death. And the church denies MMS played any role, to the outrage of her husband.
MMS did kill my wife. There's no question in my mind.
And now Nash is working to help expose MMS and the leaders of the church who are pushing it.
Those that were there, we remember with care.
Especially the mystery man at the very top of the church, its founder and high priest, Jim Humble, who says he discovered the miracle cure. But Humble's whereabouts have been a carefully guarded church secret until our 2020 investigative team finally tracked him down across the border in Mexico in a small town outside Guadalajara, somewhere down this dirt road.
Federal prosecutors say they'd love to have Humble come back to the United States, but that as long as he's here in Mexico, he's beyond the reach of American law, but not beyond the reach of 2020. Mr. Humble? Or is it Archbishop Humble? Yeah. Brian Ross from ABC News 2020.
When we come back.
2020 continues with Brian Ross.
The leader of the Roman Catholic Church can be found at the Vatican. The Church of England is overseen by the Archbishop of Canterbury. And then there's what's called the Genesis 2 Church of Health and Healing, founded by a man who says he came down to Earth from another galaxy, Jim Humble.
There was 5 of us went to the Milky Way galaxy.
And as wacky as he seems, he says hundreds of thousands of Americans are now buying what he has been preaching, a miracle cure for virtually every disease, from autism to breast cancer, called MMS, for Miracle Mineral Solution.
Hundreds of thousands of lives have actually been saved up to this time.
Mr. Humble? Or is it Archbishop Humble? Brian Ross from ABC News 2020.
And when we caught up with him in Mexico, without his church vestments of white pants and bejeweled Panama hat, Humble hardly seemed like the high priest of a church.
The government says what you're selling is poison, that you're hurting people, you're hurting children. There may have been deaths. What do you say about that?
I say it ain't true.
You stand by this?
Of course.
You think that's a good thing for children to take?
I do, yes.
Women with breast cancers take this, you think?
Many women with breast cancer have been cured.
Is there any proof of that, sir?
I have.
There's no proof of that, and
I
you know
have
it.
Thousands.
Aren't you just a con man?
Well, I don't think so.
But in the wake of the death of Sylvia Nash, federal authorities opened an investigation of the MMS network, resulting in the conviction of one of the MMS distributors, Daniel Smith, a follower of Jim Humble, now serving 4 years in prison for selling MMS as a drug.
He turned a profit, and people were buying it, believing that it would help them.
Assistant Attorney General Ben Miser says email evidence showed Smith was in it for the money, that he and others in a company he formed expected to become $6 million men by selling the miracle cure.
And that was all at the expense of individuals who were made sicker.
And with the church claiming that millions of MMS kits have been sold and some 1,700 reverends who have gone through training seminars, there's big money at stake.
You take $100 for every head, don't you?
Something like that.
But when pressed for details about his cut,
the money didn't matter.
One reason, I suppose.
Church leader Humble became unhappy with our questions.
I'm tired of this interview. I'm going to leave. Sorry.
As long as the high priest Humble stays in Mexico, it may be difficult for American officials to investigate him, offering us a papal wave goodbye. And his number 2 man, Archbishop Brennan, boasts the law can't touch him either because he's part of a church offering a sacrament.
The church is under no law. That's why you can go to a church and get political asylum. A priest can give a kid alcohol, minor, in public and not get arrested.
The cloak of religion does not protect illegal conduct from prosecution.
So by calling it a sacrament of a church that they've created, they're still open to prosecution?
They could still be prosecuted, yes, if they are selling it in order to cure diseases and are telling people that it will cure diseases.
Protocols, sacraments that
The Archbishop says the church is collecting donations for the miracle cure, not selling it.
help us, help others.
But as we saw in our undercover investigation, Brennan continues to make his outrageous claim.
What would you use this for? The cancers, the Lyme disease, Parkinson's, stuff that's taking a long time to heal, and usually within 3 to 6 months they're fine.
He says that it can cure pretty much anything.
Among those who paid $450 to be inside the supposed church service, our 2020 undercover reporter, Lisa Bartley, of our Los Angeles station KABC, with her iPhone in hand.
He told you this would cure breast cancer.
He says that that's the very easiest thing that they can cure.
In fact, he says all kinds of cancer.
Okay? Just with the 1 drop an hour. From prostate cancer to brain cancer to autism.
Plus HIV.
We get rid of that quick. It's easy.
Leukemia in children.
We got some kids with leukemia. We did 10 hours a day, okay?
Mr. Brennan, Brian Ross from ABC News. Can we talk to you for a second, please?
But once outside his hotel conference room pulpit, the Archbishop didn't seem very eager to talk about his miracle cure.
Are you harming people, do you think, with this, sir? You're not? Not at all. And you stand by that this can cure all these diseases?
We cure many things.
Now joined by his son, also a self-ordained bishop in the church, Brennan had a lot to say about us.
ABC's bullshit. Who owns that? The Rothschilds? Huh?
What
Who
are you
owns
talking
these
about?
banks?
Are you really serious?
You're really lost, man. You are so out of touch. You are so out of touch.
Do you
with
honestly?
reality.
Yes. Let me ask you a question.
You
Do you
are
let me ask you- can I-
ABC, CBS, Fox News. You're all liars. It's all scripted. This guy's an actor.
Are you really serious about this? You
You're
think
an
this?
actor.
No, I'm
Get
a
this actor
reporter.
out of my way.
And you honestly believe this can cure cancer?
You're an actor, okay?
I'm a reporter.
You're a piece of, they say in Spanish.
But just leave.
Go check
We
out the
we are
facts,
busy
okay?
with our church service.
I've asked for live interviews,
Yes.
and I've got the facts. And you people are bull liars. And you're just an actor, you're a puppet. You little puppet. Look at you. Look at me, sir. Do you know this about the FDA? Sir, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
I do know what I'm talking about,
you
sir.
don't know. You're a
Have you-
scripted actor.
Have you seen
That's
these?
all you are. Enjoy yourself, buddy. Stupid son of a bitch.
And then the Archbishop went back inside to his church service to tell his congregation about the encounter of 2020, saying he looked forward to our investigative report.
I hope they think I'm a raving lunatic. I really do. Because we gotta get people's attention, you know?
MMS as a medicine is a fraud. MMS is not a medicine. It's a dangerous substance. It harmed me greatly by causing my wife and my partner in sailing to be no longer with me.
I don't know that I have the depraved enough mind to actually explain how these people are motivated or how they live with themselves. What kind of psychosis they're engaged in that allows them to walk around like this. You're preying on desperate mothers and fathers. How can you not call that evil?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Vargas.
And I'm David Muir. And what you just heard is our question really right here tonight. Is it evil? Do you think they're pretending to have a miracle cure to rake in money? Let us know on Facebook and Twitter and use the hashtag ABC2020.
But without question, there are people who are pretenders, making up all new identities, faking disabilities for big bucks, and wait till you see how far they've gone.
Coming up, she was a small-town waitress at the local diner. So how did she reinvent herself as French royalty?
You've described her as the grande dame.
And what reality stars are now facing reality, busted for disability fraud?
That's our guy right there. There's our mark.
The Pretenders, when we return.
It's easy to understand indulging in a fantasy life to take yourself out of a humdrum one. But what about when that fantasy leads to full-blown pretending? Rebecca Jarvis with someone who went from serving French fries to serving up a scam as a French royal.
Once upon a time, the story goes, a little girl grew up in a fairy tale castle on a sprawling estate under towering trees. Her name was as impressive as her home, Genevieve de Montremer. Her childhood, a storybook tale, which begins our story too. Genevieve told the world she'd been born into the Rochechouart family, one of the oldest noble families in France, dating back to the 800s. That's when Charlemagne ruled the Western world and algebra was invented.
The Rochechouart family is one of the famous family of France. It's quite a well-known name.
This is no movie set, no theme park. It's the actual family castle that dates back to the 13th century. Genevieve's resume was equally impressive. Educated at the finest European schools, earning degrees to match her pedigree.
She was an MD and a PhD.
In genetics.
But this story isn't the full story. We turn from France to Fresno, the Central California city where Genevieve de Montremer debuts in the early 1990s. Her past shrouded in mystery. Her future, aglow with ambition.
People come from all over the world to start a new life here. It's down to earth. It's not pretentious. There's also a lot of great wealth in kind of a quiet way.
Genevieve, yes, that's her crown, finds her prince when she meets Dr. Michael Weiler, a wealthy pathologist. They marry in 1991, have a little girl, and eventually settle on this lush 15-acre property. Genevieve's prize jewel is her stable of a very expensive and extremely rare breed of horse called Friesians.
She had way more than $1 million worth of horses, easy.
She was a legend amongst the Frisian community. She was a geneticist. She
was revolutionizing Frisians in America. You were starstruck.
Yeah, the fact that she would talk to me when she had all these horses and she knew all these things.
Cheryl Skegan and her husband Brian Gwartz both had a lifelong love of horses, and she was eager to chat with the storied Genevieve.
You've described her as the grande dame of the Frisian world.
She exuded tremendous influence.
Did she flaunt her wealth?
Oh, yes. Oh, I don't deal with that. You know, my people deal with that.
Genevieve was famous for her lavish equestrian events and parties.
What were the parties she hosted in her home like?
They were great. She had a beautiful home.
And she would have a huge catered lunch and the tennis courts and a beautiful covered arena. It was just spectacular.
But Genevieve herself was somewhat of a recluse. Like Elsa in Frozen, she rarely came out of her house. Few photos exist of her from this time. She told people she was battling leukemia. And on those rare occasions she was seen, friends say she almost always wore an IV like the one seen here.
What did she tell you about her illness?
That she was dying of leukemia, that she didn't know how long she had. I saw her twice, and I think that's more than most people have.
Over how many years?
Over 10 years.
But behind those stable doors, Genevieve de Montremer was hiding a queen-size secret. A secret that no one in her elite equestrian world could have ever imagined. A mere 30 miles away, we find a man named Gary Hoffman. He knows the face in this picture. Who could forget it? But he says this woman's real name is Genevieve Sanders.
First impression.
Beautiful young lady, very smart. The kind of person that, hey, I'd like to get to know her.
Genevieve Sanders was an all-American girl from Lindsay, California, the daughter of a farmer. She never earned a PhD, and he says she didn't know much French. Gary met her while she was a student at Fresno State University, and he was a teaching assistant.
We got to know each other quite well, just hanging out here, going over to the library next door.
After 2 years, the farmer's daughter and teacher tied the knot. They lived on a tight budget, not quite in a shoe, but in a very modest home. Genevieve took waitressing jobs to keep the cupboard from going bare. But that crown was real, just wasn't from France. Check out her sash in this picture. Yes, Genevieve Sanders was the reigning national raisin queen. Here she is arriving on a 2-week trip to Japan to bolster raisin sales around the Pacific Rim.
She seemed to really enjoy the spotlight.
Yeah, she definitely enjoyed it. She enjoyed that little bit of taste of low-level celebrity she had. She could sort of see how this could be transformed to something else.
Now, at this time, Madonna was queen of the pop charts. That's important because Gary says her transformation from Michigan girl to global superstar inspired his young bride.
Genevieve was very much into that, and how a young woman could put on this persona and through all these videos project herself in this character.
The metamorphosis is gradual. Genevieve starts adopting a French accent while she's waiting tables at the Sutter Bar and Grill in Fresno.
What did you think at the time?
I thought it was kind of funny. At home, she would get in front of the mirror and say a few words. I just became to think that it was reinforced, it was rewarded, it was something that people liked to talk to her. She became that much more interesting.
The act worked. It brought bigger tips, and soon Genevieve is almost going full-time French, even at home.
You had to have realized at some point this is a little kind of crazy behavior.
She was my wife, and I loved her.
Eventually, Gary starts looking for an exit out of the land of make-believe. Divorce papers are his ticket.
I'm glad I'm out.
Years later, Genevieve was able to fully realize her phony French dreams when she married the wealthy Dr. Weiler. Her plebeian past has been replaced with the fabricated tale of her noble birth. And it might have worked, but some say she starts to take the Marie Antoinette act too far.
She could hurt you. She could hurt you emotionally, she could hurt you financially, and she was mean. I did something that upset her, and at that point I was supposedly not allowed on her property.
But how can you stay angry with a woman dying of leukemia? It was no secret. Genevieve's failing health is even the subject of an article in this National Horse magazine. Then in late 2007, her husband announces that Genevieve succumbs to her illness. But was her end just the beginning? Coming up, Chapter 2 of our story, as both Genevieve and her buried past return with a vengeance.
I was flabbergasted. I
couldn't breathe for a second. It was just unbelievable.
"2020 returns with The Pretenders."
Chapter 2 of our tale picks up with the news that Genevieve de Montremer has died, and the heartbroken world of Frisian horse breeding prepares to bid her adieu.
They dedicated the national show to her. You know, she was like a heroine.
This sorrowful obituary pays tribute to the matriarch of the Frisian community.
People were devastated.
But there's no funeral. Her friends are told this is because her body has been buried back in France according to an ancient family ritual.
The French family in France, they took her heart, put it in a cathedral.
Her French death certificate, seen here, circulates among the grieving horse community. Back in California, Genevieve's distraught husband, Michael Weilert, says he can no longer bear to live here without his wife. He puts the place up for sale, touting it as a hot property built and decorated to the standards of excellence demanded by the French aristocracy. Asking price, $2.3 million. Cheryl Skegan and Brian Gewertz were in the market for a property for their horses.
How was Michael Weilert coping with his wife's death?
He stood out in front of the front door with us and actually cried over his wife's death.
In May 2009, the sale goes through. But when the new owners take possession, they say the place is far from fit for a king, uncovering unremedied structural problems that they estimate would cost at least $800,000 to fix.
And the minute we actually confronted him with that, it was, "You'll have to speak to my lawyer."
In preparation for their lawsuit, Cheryl and Brian say they come across something startling. That's Genevieve's signature on the deed to the property. But zut alors, it's dated March 20th, 2008, almost 4 months after she died.
I was flabbergasted. I couldn't breathe for a second. It was just unbelievable.
We thought the deed was forged. And then we got the notary. Now, the deed was not forged because he remembered meeting Genevieve de Montremer.
How was this possible?
You know, it was just unbelievable.
They dig deeper and find her first husband, Gary Hoffman, and he reveals her other big secret. Genevieve is a phony francophone.
You are called in to be deposed.
Yes.
Were you surprised?
Yes. What had been just talking at a restaurant to maybe get better tips became something that was a true character for her, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did not see that coming.
Word quickly gets around the equestrian community.
Oh, it spread like wildfire. It was basically, I can't believe it, I can't believe it, I can't believe it, and yet it's, oh my God.
In their suit, Cheryl and Brian allege that those claims about the royal status of the property were all a fraud, cooked up by Genevieve and her husband to inflate its value.
This is ABC 30 Action News.
The two claim de Montremer was French royalty. Cheryl Skegan says their false claims drove up the price of the property.
The case heads to trial, and it's not just the Frisian world that's watching. Fresno can't get enough of the story.
I think they could write 5 books over this and make this a fantastic soap opera.
Which brings us to the strangest moment in this fantastic soap opera.
Here begins videotape number 1 in the deposition of Genevieve de Montremer.
This is a deposition video unlike any other, recorded not in a lawyer's office, but by Genevieve's bed, her doctor at her side.
She been sedated, doctor?
Not to my knowledge.
She spends a portion of the deposition hiding under her covers, but she insists she's not pulling a Princess and the Pea routine. She's just too ill to respond.
Did you ever work as a waitress?
Okay.
Is that a yes?
Okay.
She answered okay.
As the deposition continues, finally, the truth.
Who are you?
Genevieve Sanders.
Isn't Genevieve Sanders your maiden name?
That's my name.
It was weird. You walked out of there going, oh, this is just a farce. This is a farce.
The defense argues that the plaintiffs purchased the property as is and should have inspected it more closely. The most shocking courtroom bombshell was that Weilert admits to faking his wife's death. He said she was suffering from a debilitating medical condition and wanted, like Garbo, to be left alone.
What her husband testified was he did it out of love. That was her desire, was to be dead. And so he made it so, at least on paper.
After 8 weeks, Cheryl and Brian win their case.
Cheryl Skegan shed a few tears after a multi-million-dollar verdict in her favor.
They're awarded more than $1.5 million in damages.
They read the first count, so I go, oh my God, we've won everything.
Today, Genevieve and Michael are living in more modest digs in Clovis, California. Clovis, by the way, is also the name of a medieval king, perhaps the closest she will now come to French royalty. Genevieve and her husband turned down our request for an on-camera interview. She did message us on Facebook, saying her health issues are very real and punishing, and that her fake French identity was simply an internet persona.
If she had an illness, I would feel compassion for her having the illness, but having an illness doesn't excuse fraud and deceit.
What would you say to Genevieve if you were speaking to her face-to-face today?
Stand on your own 2 feet and apologize to all of the people that you hurt.
Own up to this and then continue on with a better life, because you can get forgiveness.
Sounds like Brian and Cheryl haven't given up hope that there still could be a happily ever after.
Next.
Kathy Caswell, come on down.
Remember her? The poster child for workman's comp fraud? You've seen her busted. Tonight, she's got company that might surprise you. Reality TV stars.
Busted.
When The Pretenders returns.
Is it workers' comp or workers' con? People pretending to be too sick to work but then caught in the act, going wild away from the office. It might look funny, but it is not a laughing matter when you, the American taxpayer, are then stuck with the bill. Here's Cecilia Vega.
Kathy Caswell, come on down.
Who could forget this woman who said she was too hurt to work, yet spun the big wheel on The Price is Right? Or the beauty queen who sashayed down the runway on a foot that she supposedly injured on the job. Tonight, meet a new member of our fake injury Hall of Shame, stalwart fisherman Paul Hebert. He harpoons, hauls, and heaves gigantic bluefin tuna fish on National Geographic's reality show Wicked Tuna.
It's like tying a rope onto a train.
But at the same time, Hebert was reeling in big Hollywood bucks. Prosecutors say there was something fishy going on.
Now under fire, a TV reality star who said he couldn't walk properly.
It turns out the salty seafarer made national headlines for hauling in tens of thousands of dollars in disability payments for an injury to both of his legs that he claimed left him unable to work, walk, or lift heavy weights.
Heavy fish.
What you haven't seen until tonight is Hebert facing the music. When we caught up with him, the fearless fisherman denied being a scammer, saying that while he did catch a fish this big, it wasn't so heavy after all.
Tuna fish is the easiest job I've ever done in my life. I've been doing it since I was right out of diapers.
We'll see Hebert again a little later, but it turns out he's not the only person with TV fame accused of making false claims. Meet Joseph DeRico, a former New Jersey cop who sustained a left leg injury on the job, resigned from the force, and started collecting a $70 grand a year pension for total disability. But watch as DeRico shows up here on the True TV reality show Bear Swamp Recovery. And like a crazed grizzly, he plucks grown men from monster trucks and tosses them aside like rag dolls. When you're totally and permanently disabled, what do you get?
You get 66.6% of your salary tax-free for the rest of your life.
John Sergio served on the New Jersey Retirement Board that pulled the plug on DeRico's pension after they saw his reality show stunts.
If he could do this, he could be a police officer.
DeRico is appealing the decision. Now, all these scammers just couldn't stay out of the spotlight, which investigators say made it a cinch to catch them. But intrepid New Jersey private eye Barry Kroll knows that most fake injury investigations take a lot of time and creativity.
That's our guy right there. There's our mark.
We've been out sleuthing with Barry before, and she will go the distance to get the surveillance goods she needs to make her case. I've seen you put on wigs. I've seen you drive like crazy. Is there anything you won't do to get your guy?
There's not much that I won't do.
One case took years for Barry to bust. A plaintiff who sued for medical malpractice, saying when he tried to go bass fishing, he had problems because of a botched abdominal surgery.
Now, this is somebody who says he can't bend, he can't, everything's uncomfortable for him.
Barry follows the suspected cheater as he gingerly makes his way to a doctor's appointment.
He's looking sad. Watch, he'll lift up his shirt and start to rub his stomach.
Oh, ouch. After leaving the doctor, he heads here, and that is not a prescription he's picked up.
Leaves there, he goes to the liquor store.
He must have come upon some sort of remedy in that liquor store, because even in all that pain, he picks up his rods and heads to the bay.
He hops this guardrail and he starts walking down. He's ready to fish.
I can vouch, that is no cakewalk down to that pier. Treacherous is the way I would describe it. They say fishing is therapeutic, but this is truly miraculous. The fisherman had claimed he was too hurt to cast over his head.
He's holding the fishing pole, as somebody normally would. He's got his bait on it, and he's whipping it behind and over.
Right over his shoulder.
Right over the shoulder.
When presented with the video, Barry says the plaintiff quickly settled the case. When gotcha video is the goal, Chicago private eye Bob Keene will also go to any length to get it. I've seen him in action from the woods to the roads.
And here we go. Oh my God.
You love the chase, Bob.
Absolutely.
You have to be a little crazy to do this job.
Crazy? I don't know if the word's crazy. Ambitious, persistent, clever, creative.
This might be Bob's most extreme challenge yet, an endurance obstacle course. He's here to track one of the contestants, who Bob says is faking an upper body injury that supposedly left the man too hurt to work. The insurance company handling the claim didn't want us to show his face. Bob begins the race not really knowing what he's in for.
That was ice water.
And he channels his inner Rocky. Bob's not just trying to survive the obstacle course, he's racing to keep up with his mark. He's got his eyes and his lens trained on the suspected faker, who's never more than one rope crawl or mudslide away. Victory is sweet.
On a day's work. Piece of cake.
Bob was also delighted with his surveillance results.
He's a complete faker. He is busted. I am ecstatic.
Bob's client was equally thrilled. After showing the evidence to the claimant, he instantly dropped his case. The consequences for getting caught can be severe. Remember Paul Hebert, the man who catches huge tuna on reality TV?